Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And that brings us to a title which has been released by the Criterion Collection in, say, a Blu-ray release, which is what I have here, at spy number 1193. And this is a work which is described as being from the year 1987. And the name of the director is Luis Valdez. And the name of the work is La Bamba. This is the work, this is the amazing work, which is from the year 1987, and it is from the director Luis Valdez and producers Taylor Hackford and Bill Borden, with associate producer being Daniel Valdez, who also appears in the film, by the way. And if we're speaking of the cast, we have to mention, of course, great performances by, for example, Lou Diamond Phillips and Isai Morales and Rosana de Soto and Elizabeth Pena, and I mentioned Daniel Valdez, also Joe Pantoliano and Daniel von Zernick, and others. I should also mention to Los Lobos and Carlos Santana and Miles Goodman contributing to this. This is incredible work, which is the film that is La Bamba. And before I go, before I go any further, let me just say that this film is very special for me. It was released in the latter part of the 1980s, in 1987. So this was just at the time that I too was growing up. I was a kid when this was released, and it was a big deal. I remember watching TV as a kid and seeing how this was being reviewed by critics of the day. And there were so many commercials on TV, and it was a big deal. And it brought to my attention, again, as a child who was, say, 7 years old, 8 years old, around the time that this film was being initially released. I was in the U.S. at the time. Giving to me information that, being a kid, I didn't know until then, but I knew upon hearing all this wonderful buzz and excitement and electricity in the air about this phenomenal figure of music history, that was Ritchie Valens. And so that became a huge deal for me. And so this film, I'm looking at it with that sense of nostalgia, and I'm also looking at it also as revisiting this film. And every time I revisit this film, I am filled with so much joy and spirited energy, as well as a reminder of the life and times of Ritchie Valens, the highs and the lows, and the successes and triumphs, and the tragedies, and moments of sadness. And indeed, if you know the story of Ritchie Valens and how he impacted the landscape of American rock and roll and popular music during this period of the 1950s, I mean, this is immense. And so you will also probably know the history, the life and career of Ritchie Valens, and how what happened to him in terms of the details of his biography. Those are, I think, those form the foundation of the basis or backdrop of this film, La Bamba, which could be said in those terms, therefore, to be what is, I think, often referred to, especially nowadays, as a type of cinema biopic, a biography, a cinematic expression of someone who, based on the actual events of someone who was an actual figure, in this instance, a figure that was very prominent, very famous in the world of American popular music and rock and roll. So the figure here in question is Ritchie Valens, played here with incredible magnetism, and from a performance by Lou Diamond Phillips, who is, as I say, just this is a show-stopping performance if ever there was one. And Lou Diamond Phillips shows us the heart and the energy and the perseverance and the drive, as well as the overall goodwill and feeling that is accompanying and that is surrounding this person that ends up becoming Richie Valens, famous the world over. And we see him and his family and his beginnings and how he went from place to place to place, step to step to step, from his beginnings, which maintained an importance on his close knit circle, his family. And this is, of course, where we see the great relationship portrayed between Richie on the one hand and the mother figure, the matriarch figure. This is the Rosana de Soto character, incredibly important, Connie Valenzuela, and how she forms a very important part of Richie's life in terms of the family life and dynamic, but also in terms of business and in terms of growing his popularity, because we see throughout the film how she's also playing a key role in some really critical places in helping to promote Richie and his musical brilliance and genius, because it wasn't easy at first to get the word going about who this person was, but slowly but surely that became a thing, and then he became incredibly popular, due in no small part to the efforts of his mother, again here portrayed with great grace and intelligence and drive and passion by Rosana de Soto. It's a wonderful performance. But that's not all in terms of the key relationships that we see here. We also see the relationship between him and Isai Morales and Elizabeth Pena. And I just mentioned here, Elizabeth Pena's performance is an outstanding, delightful, intense. It's incredibly intense at times, and that is also due to her character's relationship with Bob, who is Isai Morales' character, and this is a incredible. A very intense relationship between Isai Morales' character and Lou Diamond Phillips' character, and this forms, in many ways, the key, or one of the key central motifs of the film upon which it is based. That is, it's a film that is about the birth and growth of Richie Valens' life and career as a musician, an incredibly popular musician. And also underlying that, or perhaps in parallel with that, or going hand in hand in that, is his relationship with the members of his family. In particular, his relationship with the Isai Morales character. And this idea of the brother relationship forming in many times very supportive backbone, but also sometimes very tumultuous, sometimes edging towards the realm of a type of dangerous sibling rivalry, which has the potential of totally breaking things apart at some points. Also, that provides a window into a showing of the vulnerability and the sensitive side of our main character, Lou Diamond Phillips' performance of Richie Valens. Not just a sense of a 100% wholesome image, shall we say, of Richie Valens, but also there is an undercurrent of the complexities surrounding, say, his relationship with his brother and how that manifests in terms of the various emotional outbursts that occur in the film. And also how that forms a gateway into other aspects that were part of, maybe for better or for worse, that were part of the life and times of Richie Valens. So, for example, we see how his brother relationship, or his relationship with Isai Morales' character, is also a source of strength and kind of fortitude, especially when we see him and them try to confront certain aspects of their fears and their psychological, psychological based inhibitions or dispositions and the like. And so we see this play out, especially in the intense scenes between brother and brother. So, for example, there is some intense dialogue about how they perceive their relationships with their parents and how that might affect maybe certain sibling rivalries or even jealousies, but that also reveals something about how the characters feel about themselves, again, for better or for worse. And I think this is really bold and brave. So we see certain turns about how, say, Richie Valens feels about himself, and which I think is incredibly important to get a further understanding as to the psychological nuance and complexity of what drove him, at least in the embodiment of this performance by Lou Diamond Phillips, and in the embodiment of this film by cast and crew across the board. So that also is allowing us to explore how external aspects of his life and times growing up also might have informed who he was and who he is. So there are sometimes elements or undercurrents of where he comes from, his background, and there are moments where, I mean, there's some interesting subtle moments about reminders of say language, and sometimes Spanish language is spoken, and Richie Valens, I think, has a really interesting position in terms of how he deals with that. It comes up in very subtle moments in the film, but those also feed into a sort of overall understanding and appreciation of Richie Valens and his position. And not just that, of course, we see his development, or I'm sorry, we also see elements and undercurrents of that, especially when we get into the relationship between Richie Valens and Donna, and what happens in terms of Donna's family, how Donna's family reacts to this potential relationship between Donna and Richie, and what that might mean, especially in consideration of social, economic, and racial background. And so this also plays a type of undercurrent that is part of the experience of Richie Valens and his family, in terms of a type of adversarial type of experience, but also in terms of how he deals with it or confronts it, and not just him, but also how other people around him, including Donna, including Bob, including Connie, including Rosie, etc., how they in turn deal with this type of externalized, say, adversarial effect, whether it be subtle and indirect, or perhaps more direct in some instances. But in any event, this forms the lifeblood of the film experience that is further ignited by the brilliance of the music. There are some sequences and scenes that are just electrifying, recreations of concerts, recreations of actual performances, recording studio sessions, which also show the quote unquote blood, sweat, and tears, end quote, in going the efforts that were needed to make a recording work. And I love those sequences. And they show the frustration, the time involved, and the need for patience, and trying to get it right, the trying to strive for perfection in the recording studio. Those are great sequences, as well as showing and showcasing the wonderful bravura and the musical brilliance of Richie Valens, and reminding us through the music of Los Lobos, through the demeanor and activities and physical presence of Lou Diamond Phillips and company. I mean, this is a brilliant film from top to bottom. It is a heartfelt, heartwarming film that is very honest, and I think also it has a wonderful trajectory that is easy to follow, while also giving us the spirit, the lifeblood, the very essence, if you will, of this person, this important person, this magical musician that gave the world so many wonderful works of art that are now legendary and that have iconic status, and that are further celebrated, whose legacies are further celebrated by things such as this great film from 1987, which is La Bamba. The Criterion Collection has released this film, La Bamba, on the single disc Blu-ray edition, and it is here at spine number 1193, purported to be based on a new 4K digital restoration approved by director Luis Valdez with 5.1 surround DTS HD master audio soundtrack. And already prior to the start of this video recording, I've taken the liberty of removing the fold-out leaflet. It is a fold-out type, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in this video. But I have done so because, among other things, it states about the master, and I quote, La Bamba is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. It was restored in 4K by Sony Pictures Entertainment. Scanning was done in 4K on a Scanity film scanner at Colorworks in Culver City, California, from the 35mm original camera negative. Digital image restoration was completed by Prasad Corporation in Chennai, India. HDR color grading was completed by Christian Lamier at Colorworks. The audio restoration and 5.1 upmix were completed at Chess Audio in Burbank, California, and sourced from the 35mm restored LCRS DME magnetic tracks. The restoration was supervised by Bill Cardes for Sony Pictures Entertainment, with final color approval by director Luis Valdez. So this is the information about um, the master, the transfer, the presentation quality. So I must admit that I've seen this film since its initial release, and I've seen it over the years, including, say, on VHS tape, etc. But unfortunately, I never owned it on physical media until now. So I don't have as strong a frame of reference in terms of the release history and physical media history that others might have. So I apologize for my lack of expertise in this and indeed many other categories. But I can say that, again, from my own experience with watching this film and trying to rely on those memories when watching it now on this Criterion release, I feel like the world is opened up. There are some moments that I think really stand out in terms of feeling different and feeling sharper and brighter, I think in a very positive way. I would bring one's attention, for example, to some of the interior scenes. There's a scene in particular involved, as I mentioned earlier, in a recording booth, a recording session, a recording studio. And I noticed details in the background that I'd never noticed before, I never thought I'd noticed before. And so those they felt familiar because I'd seen the film many times on the one hand, but those are examples of where it felt new and a really, really interesting experience. I must say I was very, very much engaged with this film. I always have been engaged with this film, but I feel like I'm experiencing it in this great, wonderful way that still feels faithful and has a type of fidelity to this, lack of a better phrase, a type of filmmaking during this era, which I think has a certain brightness and sheen to it. There's a way in which the photography has a lovely crispness to it that preserves a sense of the color palette as well. So I like that. But some of the details are emerging for me that maybe escaped my eyes when I had seen it, say, on VHS in the past, for example. So for these and other reasons, I'm very, very happy with this. And I must say, too, I'm just again, I don't have that strong frame of reference in terms of all the release history of this film. I apologize. I have seen it many times, but again, I just don't have that information at my immediate grasp. So I'm going to lose all the details in this. But again, for what it's worth, and based on my own subjective experience, I thought the sound too was quite a knockout. It was, and that's important as well. You had to feel the music almost bounce off and has to become alive in that way. Many of the other parts, non-musically, of course, are very much alive, but there's something about the Ritchie Valens experience and feeling that in the musical moments and hearing that, I think is quite rendered quite well when I'm experiencing this Criterion Blu-ray release. And so now let us turn, to our attention to the supplements, which we can find. I have the Blu-ray here, and it has that wonderful motif of the use of the color palette, which is, I think, reminiscent of, among other things, a type of marquee or the type of poster that one might see to show the program or the lineup of a concert, etc. I love that quality and feel to it, and it's reflected on the cover art as well as also in the design of the menu, as well as the booklet. And we'll talk about the cover art and artistic choices here, which are great, by the way. But among the things that are great about this are the supplements. And so we have, first up, when you're talking about the supplements, let's first talk about the commentaries. So we have our choice of 2 commentaries, and these were commentary tracks. These were commentary tracks that are archival. So the first up is director, cast, and executive producer. So we check this, and it says, this commentary track, recorded in 1998, features director Luis Valdez, actors Lou Diamond Phillips and Isa Morales, and executive producer Stuart Benjamin. To listen to the commentary while viewing the movie, press the audio key on your remote at any time. So this is the first commentary track from '98. So it is archival. It's still very fresh and very, I think, relevant, and it has so many great details, anecdotal details, some details about some of the crane shots that were used, because there's some angles that were taken from high up, or shots that were taken from high angles to show, say, the vista, the environment surroundings, these sweeping environment or setting establishing shots, which are really great, as well as some turns of the narrative that are discussed. Isa Morales and Lou Diamond Phillips also talk about the casting and working together on the locations, and also in the playing out of the scenes, etc. Uh, and the like. So this is, I think, a wonderful dynamic here to have. So this is the first of the commentary tracks. It's worth checking out. That's not all, though, because we have a second commentary track, which is also archival in that it is from, I understand, 98. And it says here, this commentary track, recorded in 1998, features producer Taylor Hackford and associate producer Daniel Valdez. To listen to the commentary while viewing the movie, press the audio key on your remote at any time. This is also taken around the same time as the first commentary track. So we have not one, but two. And this is from 98. My understanding is that this film, upon its release over the years, has been made available with commentary tracks. I've never been able to listen to those until just now. So it's been my great pleasure to be able to listen to the first one with Luis Valdez and Louis Diamond Phillips and producer Stuart Benjamin and Isa Morales, and then the second one with Taylor Hackford and Daniel Valdez. So really, really cool. And this track here, the second of the two commentary tracks, where Taylor Hackford and Daniel Valdez are talking about the genesis of the project, how it came from their ideas, and there's a point where Daniel Valdez could have portrayed Richie Valens itself, and Taylor Hackford is really talking about his love of the music and his real deep appreciation for Richie Valens, some of the things that they needed to do in order to secure the rights to be able to make this film in the first place, including meeting the key figures in Richie Valens' life who were still alive at the time of trying to produce this film, and seeing how those familiar faces, so to speak, also appear and emerge throughout the film as well. So that's really interesting. I should point out too, I must admit, I'm not too familiar with this background, so I apologize. But I could get there was a comment here, or they're not prevalent throughout, but there was a comment here and there where they make reference to Taylor Hackford and Daniel Valdez make reference to their views about Luis Valdez's approach to theater and cinema prior to his involvement in La Bamba. So it's an interesting dynamic to see that type of, say, I don't want to call it rift per se, but there's an interesting way in which maybe there might be certain modes of cinema, say philosophy or theater philosophy, artistic creative philosophy, that is of course aligned because they're working together, but they're also expressing maybe various, say, points of view that might express certain differences in terms of a type of creative philosophy. But that being said, they do acknowledge, of course, that it was a group effort, that was a very strong group effort, and there's a lot of interesting anecdotes that they also share, as well as the appreciation for the music, and also for the Valenzuela's family's participation and cooperation with the production, etc. So really, really interesting stuff. It would have been, well, I'll talk about that when we get to the other supplements as well, but the fact that we get this great detail from Daniel Valdez and Taylor Hackford, especially around the genesis of the film, how it came about in the first place, I think it makes this a real standout commentary, that is part of the duo standout commentaries, the first and the second commentary track. So please check it out. Check out the film with the commentary tracks one after the other. It's really, really fantastic. And then next, let us turn to the supplements, which has its own separate submenu. And I'll select it right now. And so there are quite a number here. First up is Luis Valdez. And when you press this button, it says, in this interview conducted by the Criterion Collection in 2023, director Luis Valdez talks about the legacy of La Bamba, as well as how his work as a theater director and community organizer influenced the making of the film. So this is great. This is a one-on-one discussion with Luis Valdez, and he is speaking about his career, the life and times, in terms of his early life and his studies, and how his studies brought his attention to, or turned his attention, and his life indeed, to the arts and to theater and to acting and to this type of engagement with theater and the arts in a creative process way, and also in terms of an expression way and a political expression ways, which is part of especially his early career as described by him uh, in the world of the arts and theater, and using that as, in his words as well, maybe merging the concepts of theater and expression on the one hand and political protest on the other, and how that's linked to many concerns and themes that were very vital to him and to his life and the people around him, uh, based in part on socioeconomic class, based on race and race relations, etc. So it becomes a very vital part in terms of the dynamic and approach of Luis Valdez as a filmmaker, which and an artist and a director, which leads him to his work in the theater, as well as later in the film world with regard to his work, which is referenced here, Zoot Suit, and so there's great mention of that work in terms of a theater work and a film work here, and indeed in another supplement which we'll talk about as well. It's a great rumor. That also is such what a film that is. Um, wow, what a film that is, and unforgettable work that is. So it's nice to hear that film being mentioned somewhat here. It's mentioned here in the context of, say, a progression of a discussion of Luis Valdez, the life and career of Luis Valdez, leading up to, of course, his introduction to the production, leading to him directing the work La Bamba, and to get a sense of his approach to the material, to get a sense of the importance of showcasing the life of Richie Valens, and also being in touch with the family in terms of the production, and also having them represented by the actors portraying them in the film as a type of approach to cinema, and also the casting choices as well. This is a really interesting aspect of this. He speaks about the reasoning and the thinking behind some of the casting choices. For instance, Isa Morales and Rosana de Soto and Alicia Pena, how they really commanded the screen, and they have a certain presence and type of authority that is so and a type of screen chemistry. It's really quite wonderful, and the same is true, of course, for Lou Diamond Phillips. Of course, this was in many ways what brought Lou Diamond Phillips to a critical and worldwide acclaim in terms of being a superstar. I mean, huge, so huge. And I just am reminded of how I saw the commercials as a kid in the '80s when this first was released, and Lou Diamond Phillips just suddenly became this name that everyone knew. I suddenly knew who Lou Diamond Phillips was, and it was because it was that big of an impact. So uh, an amazing performance. And what's interesting too is Luis Valdez also discusses, and I think in a very honest way, the reasoning behind choosing Lou Diamond Phillips for the role of Richie Valens. And and he also discusses that there might have been some say some reaction to this particular casting choice, given the the racial ethnic background of Lou Diamond Phillips, and how that may or may not have related to the ethnic and racial background of Richie Valens, the part that Lou Diamond Phillips ended up portraying on screen. And so Luis Valdez, I think, talks about this and talks about the criticism that was voiced from some circles. And he addresses it, I think, in a very honest way, in a very calm demeanor, honest way, I must say. And he acknowledging what the criticisms were, but still acknowledging, too, that I think that the choice from his point of view, and I think also from the point of view of the other filmmakers that are mentioned in the other commentary tracks and some of the other documentaries, that this point of view, I think, had its own sense of, I think, well thought out reasoning, and also it was the performance was, of course, very memorable indeed. And so I think for all these factors, I think Luis Valdez addresses that point very well and very honestly. So, which I admire very much. And of course, this is something that is mentioned too by other people that we hear in the commentary tracks and elsewhere. So. He also talks too about The key, one of the key aspects being about the brothers and the brother relationship, and this is where the performances of Isa Morales and Lou Diamond Phillips really goes. It becomes so much of the central focus, not the only central focus. There are many other central foci in the film, but it becomes one of the key points. And it's also a reminder too of how important the family members were, in this close knit circle of people within the orbit of Richie Valens, and also Donna, and also some notes about the singing, working with Los Lobos, and getting the rhythm that was so needed and so right how it was established. So, and then talking about the lasting legacy of this, and also Luis Valdez and what his approach to cinema and the theater has been up to, during, and since La Bamba. So this is a great conversation with Luis Valdez, and this is approximately 27 minutes. I forgot to mention that. Approximately 27 minutes, so please check it out if you can. It's so great. He talks about some really great information about his father and connections to the film industry and cinema, very famous films, etc. So please check it out if you can. This is approximately 27 minutes, and it's really wonderful. That's not all, because we also get another discussion with Luis Valdez, this time in what is known as the director's chair. In this 2015 program provided by El Rey Network Studios LLC, filmmaker Robert Rodriguez talks to director Luis Valdez about his storied career as well as depicting Latino identity in the arts. So this is a director's chair program, approximately 42 minutes. And I had not seen this prior to this release, but I understand it looks like, from the nature of its editing, it seems to have been something that was shown on TV, because there are moments where it seems like it's edited in a way to allow for commercial breaks. So, but totaling 42 minutes, and it's um, um, uh, um, uh, filmmaker Robert Rodriguez sitting across from filmmaker and artist Luis Valdez on a stage in the Ricardo Montalban Theater. And it's the two of them talking on stage. And Robert Rodriguez is interviewing Luis Valdez, and whom he admires so much, and he expresses, you can tell, because he knows some of the lines from Zoot Suit and La Bamba by heart. It's really wonderful to hear, and so this is also an opportunity to recount the life and times and career of Luis Valdez, not unlike the comments that we'd seen in the Criterion supplement, the first one, the interview with Criterion, but also speaking again about the importance of theater. And what I love too is speaking to about, there's a whole section on Zoot, the theater work in the film, which is its own little part. It's maybe one of the first. It's maybe the second main part or so in this piece, if you count then the next important part being the section on La Bamba. So I really like that, because again, that film Zoot is so, that work is so memorable and unforgettable. So it makes me also want to revisit that work as well. And then going to, and it really goes into detail with that, by the way. So it might be, if you can, it might be interesting to try to find that work and watch that before watching this directorship. But it's okay. I don't think it goes into too much. Well, actually, maybe I take that back. There are some details, some specific details of that work that are discussed in this. But in any event, you might be able to skip over it, because it is divided, as I say, in these very manageable divisions or chunks, because they do have parts where they are commercial breaks. So that the Zoot Suit section ends on a commercial break, and it goes straight into the section La Bamba. So if you are concerned about watching that prior to seeing or knowing that work, you can always skip over it, I think, pretty manageably. But it does then go into La Bamba, and it goes into some of the points that were mentioned in the commentary tracks, and also in the uh, in the um, in the Luis Valdez interview by Criterion. But also, I think it talks about it too, again, from Robert Rodriguez and Luis Valdez's perspective on the approach of representation of the Latino community and the arts, which is really important. Also, it's an interesting way to then come back to the notion of casting, and also how important casting was in terms of this type of representation, but also in terms of representing or expressing the actual people that they were portraying. And also then this turns into a discussion, as we was mentioning before, about the reasoning behind the casting choice that was made, in particular, for example, Isa Morales and also Lou Diamond Phillips. So that's also very interesting. It's great to see the two of them, Robert Rodriguez and Luis Valdez, talk about it in these really earnest terms, which I appreciate. And they also speak too about sort of their importance as filmmakers. And so Luis Valdez mentions this, and also Robert Rodriguez mentions this. They also mentioned they're in the the theater that is named after the great Ricardo Montalban. So they also take the time to take a moment to express their admiration for the great work of Ricardo Montalban in terms of his work as an artist, and also the great steps taken in terms of representation. So that it becomes a whole part connected to this grand sweep of the conversation that is ongoing, as we were reminded of quite affectionately in this great one-on-one or this great intimate interview between the two artists. So the director's chair, and this is approximately 42 minutes, so please check it out if you can. Next is Remembering Richie, and this is described as: this 1987 featurette showcases behind-the-scenes footage of the making of the film and its iconic soundtrack, with appearances by members of the cast and crew, Richie Valens' family, and Los Lobos, as well as Carlos Santana. So this is approximately 20 minutes. So this is great. It's from 1987, so it might seem quote unquote dated in terms of comparing it to, say, supplements made in the recent years. But don't let that stop you. This is really great, and that's part of the charm of it. That's the first thing. This is a type of supplement. I think I remember seeing this or seeing part of this somewhere along the line in my life growing up with this film. So I mean, there are some parts that seemed really familiar to me when I was watching this. So I think I've seen this before. So it was one of the things that that was very common with films released during this time, having these little making of documentaries that were fairly short in this manner. So, it's really cool. You get to hear some of the comments made contemporaneously with the cast and crew, as mentioned, Lou Diamond Phillips or Luis Valdez, Taylor Hackford. It's great, and also the music as well. There's this is great too, because we get a little bit of mentioning of it in the commentary tracks. But it's great to see the musicians also interviewed and hearing their comments here. And because again, the music is so important, really, really important. So. And there's some discussion made about some of the key concert scenes as well. So fantastic. I mean, it's mentioned in the in some of the commentary tracks too, but there's a great discussion made about Marshall Crenshaw, who portrays Buddy Holly, and also the appearance of Howard Huntsberry. Very, very memorable appearance indeed. So. And other points as well. So please check this out if you can. This is, as I mentioned, approximately 20 minutes. So that's great. And then we have the section which is called audition tapes. So we have two sections. It says here, so Lou Diamond Phillips and Isa Morales and Elizabeth Pena and Rosana de Soto. And it says here, presented here are select audition tapes from 1986 of the eventual leads of La Bamba, demonstrating director Luis Valdez's approach to building characters with his actors. Associate producer Daniel Valdez is also featured. So this is great. So this is the videotaped audition footage, and you see the actors. You see some of them auditioning, and then they're playing out the scenes, focusing in on their faces or maybe their expressions in this auditioning room. And so it's really great, and you can see already from this early stage that it's there. It's all their performance is there. Absolutely amazing. I mean, it's this great way of capturing their innate vitality and energy on the one hand, and then also capturing again the power of their performance on the other. Incidentally, I should point out too, I forgot to mention that in the director's chair section, the two artists, Robert Rodriguez and Luis Valdez, do pay their respects to Elizabeth Pena, who had by that point passed away. So they and the program itself, they do pay their respects to Elizabeth Pena there. So I forgot to mention that because I'm reminded too of just how great their performance were, including Elizabeth Pena's performance, as we see not just in the film but also in the audition tape section. So let me just say that the audition tapes here, the first set, which is Lou Diamond Phillips and Isa Morales, this is 13 minutes, 13 minutes total. And then the second set, Elizabeth Pena and Rosanna Soto, is 6 minutes total. So please check those out if you can. And then the supplements end with a trailer, and it's a really good trailer. And I remember seeing this trailer too, I think, yeah, growing up. So this is great. And I love the way that the font is used, La Bamba, in this passionate, handwritten type of way. I thought it was really cool. But anyway, there we go. So that's the state of things when it comes to the supplements included with this great release by Criterion of La Bamba. It would have been great, again, maybe we'd have, I mean, we got 2 commentary tracks, which is great. Maybe we could have gotten another commentary track. I don't know, that would have been interesting. But I think the commentary tracks really go a long way. They showed very great different perspectives on the production. I would say that the other supplements are really wonderful. They focus primarily on Luis Valdez, which is, I think, very, very reasonable and very justified in terms of Luis Valdez's important contribution and leadership and directorial guidance for making this film. But it's also important to note that I think it would have been great, too, to have other supplements from supplements regarding the actors or maybe the approach to the music. We get a little bit of that in the making of featurette from '87. We get a little bit of the discussion of the music. Also, we get a little bit of the discussion of the music from the various commentary tracks. But it would have been interesting to get a separate supplement, say, on the music that's cataloged throughout the film, or the history of this period, or there's there is a type of moment in history that's referred to as the day that the music died, and it would have been interesting also to get a sense of what this history was. I'm a fan of this particular music, so I know somewhat of this history of what happened, but maybe for those who are being introduced to this world for the first time, or watching this film for the first time, or being introduced to, say, the music of Richie Valens for the first time, it would have been interesting to have maybe some other supplements that could have helped to provide some introductory information as to the background of this. That would have been interesting. But again, that is not to take away, those criticisms that I might have are not meant to take away from the greatness that are the supplements that are already here. So, and we are getting some great supplements here. Don't get me wrong here. I really think they're wonderful. So, as well as the film itself. So, in any event, those are the supplements that we see here for the film. And then let us turn our attention to the presentation or production or the cover art design, as well as the leaflet, etc. And we will go from there. So I just want to point out that I love this cover art design for the reasons that I mentioned before. It looks like the posters for a concert, and the way that the faces look, and the cutout all the way down to almost this type of, I don't know how to express it, but you can see it has the dots, a dot matrix type of look to it, which I think is it has that sense of the printing or the handmade quality, which I love. I absolutely love. It has that retro 50s vibe to it, which I think is really apropos. The art directors Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, designer Eric Skillman, art production coordinator William Briz, art assistant Julie Sussman, and that motif is carried on throughout the fold out here, as you can see. Really, really cool indeed. It is a plastic case. I love the font too. I mean, I mentioned that of La Bamba, the title. I mentioned that I love, there's the way in which it was originally marketed, this film La Bamba, and the trailers always had this frenzied handwritten way of La Bamba. It was so cool. I always liked that look. And I still like that look. All that being said, I do like the way that the title La Bamba appears here and on on this Blu-ray menu. Very, very cool indeed. And I mentioned too this type of poster or marquee, concert marquee look, which is carried on here throughout the leaflet. It is a fold out, and I'm not a big fan of the fold out. I would much rather see a staple booklet, because a staple booklet allows for more pages and for a more robust, say, inclusion of as many writings as possible. But be that as it may, this fold out includes a great essay. They're all great, including this essay, Yolanda Machado. Excuse me, Yolanda Machado. The essay is called American Dreaming, Chicano Style. And so this is a really fantastic essay. It goes into aspects of Luis Valdez and also aspects of the film La Bamba. I highly recommend that you watch the film La Bamba first, and then after you've seen the film, you can read this great essay, American Dreaming, Chicano Style. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. So this is La Bamba on Criterion's Blu-ray. It's interesting that it's on a Blu-ray. It would have been interesting to see what this film might have done had it been released by Criterion in, say, a 4K option. That would have been interesting. I'm not sure why that wasn't the case, but oh well, that's okay. That's okay, because I love the Blu-ray format. I still love the Blu-ray format, and I think this is a great example of that. Continuing on with that, it's a great release of a film that is very popular. It has a large following, I think, for wonderful reasons, and it has a type of legacy as terms of the expressions of the artists. Taylor Hackford, Daniel Valdez, Luis Valdez, as well as the actors that were involved, Rosana de Soto, Isa Morales, Elizabeth Peña, Lou Diamond Phillips, and also the musicians that were involved in terms of this film, Los Lobos, as well as the musicians that were portrayed in this film, the world of this film. Of course, the protagonist being, for this film, Richie Valens. And so what a film this is. And again, I'm looking at it in terms of the nostalgia based on how I felt when I was a kid growing up watching this film, and then now throughout the years I've revisited it. I've loved it every single time, and now I'm much older, and still I have such a great time with this. I have such a great time. Oh, this is so wonderful. And I didn't even mention, I forgot to mention too, Joe Pantoliano's performance here as Bob Keane. This is also really interesting. It's those details that he mentions, some of the dialogue that's had between Bob Keane and Richie Valens. It's so fascinating, as well as the weight of history. The weight of history is felt so heavily, heavily and heavenly. Let me put it that way. What a great experience this is. What an overall emotional experience this is. There are feelings and moments and experiences that have that great grain and texture. The feeling of a psychological visitation, psychological portrait of our characters. We get a sense of the motivations that drive Richie Valens and company throughout his life and his career, as well as the vitality and electricity of the music. La Bamba. What a film this is. So, La Bamba is on the Criterion Collection physical media catalog, my dear friends. Please check it out if you have not done so already. So, that's it for now, my dear friends. So, what do you think about this film? Please let me know in the comments section below. As always, I'm always happy to hear what it is you have to say. But in the meantime, and until the next video, my dear friends, please continue to be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including La Bamba, including the works in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.